Let's do roll call. So I am here, Meryl's here, Andre is not here, Sapna is here, Kristen, Tiffany is not, Adam, Brandon and Megan are not here, Stan is here, Jennifer is not, Matthew. Let's see if we have a quorum. Do it for 50-50. So can we proceed but just not vote? Maybe one. Just one? I think that you need more than 50. Yeah. Let me just make sure my social track adds up.
So, given what we have on here, you should somehow at least acknowledge these, so that's something and get budgets and some of the contracts at least, maybe not officially approved, but ultimately recognized in minutes, and so we can move ahead and just note that we will approve them in the August board meeting. Let me reach out to Dan and see if I can get him on the telephone.
Sure.
Is there anybody else that we have at the end of the telephone? We could just
Text Brandon, maybe?
Yeah.
Brandon can vote by text, right? He's seen and read the.
Is that acceptable, Lisa, for him to?
I think so. If we can, yeah.
Okay. Okay, I texted Brandon.
I texted Megan.
You just really need one person to respond. Okay.
All right, well, let's carry on, and then when we get to the items that require voting, hopefully somebody will have,
Megan can, she has crappy reception driving to West Virginia, but she has acknowledged that she can call in whenever we get to a voting point.
okay.
Great.
Good.
All right, well, let's do we'll get through the mission and the vision, and then maybe when we get to the consent agenda, we'll dive her in, because we'll need to vote on that. Okay. All right, Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, we do have one, sorry, I missed that. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our mission, the mission of ECS, is to educate each student to high academic standards using innovative curricula that will foster knowledge, love of, and respect for the environment and preserve it for future generations. We grow citizens. Our vision, every ECS graduate will be an actively engaged citizen driving thoughtful change in the world around them. We have quite a few guests today, which we would like to recognize. We have board candidates, Dorothy and Maddie. So thank you for joining us. I think you'll join us for 2 board meetings and get a feel for it and decide how you would like to proceed. And then we have Sarah for public comments. And are you Rosie? Rosie. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so actually we will move to public comment. Sarah, go first.
Sure. So I had 2 things, but I want to first get started with I don't know how many of you guys know, there's currently a development proposed to be, developed at the bottom of the park, at the commercial forward view. And it is zoned as park. It's currently surrounded on 3 sides by brick. The URA going to the 4th side, the URA is going to give that to brick as soon as they get some solar panels installed there. And we are working to ask the zoning board to uphold the ordinances for the park zone and to not grant the developers the variances they are asking for. As a park zone, it is, well, and the reason I'm telling you this is that I'm hoping that ECS can take a stance as an environmental school who heavily uses Frick Park. The reason that it's zoned for park is because it's so close to the park, anything that's developed there will greatly impact the park. So the zoning allows for buildings that are not higher than 3 stories. The developers are asking to build an 8-story building, so more than twice as tall. It's zoned for single-family residences. They want to make a apartment building for condo. They haven't decided. It will not be low income for sure. Land is going to be affordable, though. Oh, no. So it's like not even going to be regular affordable. It's going to be expensive housing. And they allow for a ratio of 1-to-1 of how much is a build versus size of the property. They want a 1.33. So, ratio, and then you're not allowed a retaining wall larger than 10 feet. They want a retaining wall of unknown size larger than 10 feet. They don't know how many retaining walls will leave because they haven't programmed yet. So we are asking the zoning board to not grant those. Those things that it's going to be 162 units, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. There's going to be 182 parking spots. It's at the bottom of commercial in that, like.
This is the former Irish Center.
Yeah. And you can't leave that building by foot or car. I mean, by foot or bike, like you will need a car, right? And so for them to think that 1, 2, or 3 bedroom units will only have 1 car per unit is crazy. So all of those cars will then begin to park at, there's 3 tiny little parking lots down there, and there's one at Hutchinson, down at the bottom there, and then they'll hike from Hutchinson straight across to that building. And so the community is asking the zoning board to please uphold the variances as they stand, and I'm asking ECS to also ask the zoning board to make an official statement that this will impact the park that our children use. I mean, there will be, like, you'll be able to see it from a lot of parts of the park, but there will be additional trash that's brought. It's too close to 9 Mile Run. They haven't really done any groundwork, because we're not going to do any like studies until we know we get the variances. But once we get the variances, they're going to shut through. So we're asking the zoning board to uphold, and so hoping the ECS could also take a stance. Yeah.
So I'm aware of this project, and I think there's a zoning hearing July 6th.
July 6th is the zoning hearing. Yep. So you can submit letters to the zoning board through July 5th at noon.
And do you know what the like what are the next steps in their process? Like is that zoning hearing is a public hearing, and then what happens after that?
So their purchase of the property is contingent on getting the variances. And they have to claim hardship. Their hardship is it's too expensive. We won't make enough money.
Which financial hardship is not a ground by which to do it.
Right, so we're hopeful that, except that they have made arguments that, like, there's not water that goes through there, and have to tap into Walnut Capital, and it is gonna be expensive, because they're going to have to go through Frick Park and try not to disrupt Frick Park, and it is going to be an expensive process, but they just still shouldn't build that there. It should be something that doesn't require that much.
And I don't know if you just said this, the proposed height of the building is like higher than the.
It could be higher than the bridge, yeah. Well, you are to the bridge that's right there, yeah. It's not great. It's not great. It will impact the park. And it's zoned for park because of the impact that property by where it is will impact the park. It's just too close to not. And there's like lots of things besides just bringing having humans into park, the nature of this place. Not like people are saying Irish Center's an eyesore, or I don't like it. My kids are super sad they're getting rid of the Irish Center. Like they're gonna get rid of the Irish Center, build something there. But like, let's not have an 8-story building. You walk around and like count stories on like this is 4 stories. Can you imagine this? In Brick Park, and like this would be reasonable because it's like loud. 3 stories is allowed. They want more than double this. So.
Is there a published traffic study?
No, they have said that they quoted a thing that they use, that if you build this many units, it's going to produce this many cars. And they said that rush hour, it will produce 60 additional cars. If you have less than 100 cars, it's not required for a traffic study. Zoning will definitely require a traffic study after the fact, but once they get these zonings, again, they own the property and they're gonna fight tooth and nail to get this done. But also the study, or like the numbers they use, is for Squirrel Hill. They're saying this is in Squirrel Hill. And if you leave your house at Squirrel Hill, you can hop on a bus, you can hop on the bike trails, and so those would that would be a reasonable number. Nobody can leave that building not in a car. They said they're targeting elderly from Squirrel Hill, that they want to move there. They're not walking out of there.
So which community groups or official community groups is supporting it most?
There is a new group called Pro Housing who supports housing no matter what. They just want big buildings and they think that's better to get more people here. Upstream Pittsburgh is against it. The Squirrel Hill, but they voted to deny the ratio variances and the height variances. So they're against those. They have to have on the park. Somerset, I'm not sure that they've taken official stance because of, I think they might have taken a vote and have come out against it. The individual people there have all said so, but I don't know if the HOA actually made an official stand. And then for Park Friends is
Is there a registered community organization that overlaps that property or not?
so it's Chuck. It's the Squirrel Hill. Okay, something, yeah, right.
And they come out against.
2 of the 4 ordinances, yeah. They said that multifamily there would be fine as long as it's not ridiculous and as long as there is enough parking allotted, which one spot per unit is not.
I mean, personally, my experience just in and around the city, if there's enough community opposition for a variance, the zoning board doesn't grant it.
Yeah,
They do give higher weight to any RCO, just because they speak on behalf of a larger subset of the population and whatnot, and have a certain knowledge and experience. I can't speak on behalf of this board or the school. I don't know if we'd be adding any more weight to what the RCO is otherwise already.
What's RCO stand for?
Registered community organization.
I mean, I think that it's just, again, more voices, and you heavily utilize that park and are trying to raise stewards in that park, right? And my child's class, all the kids wrote little letters about why they don't want them to build that building, and we were going to send those to the zoning board, and it is incredibly cute. Some of what they do want built there is maybe also not the best thing to build there, but Fairleigh Park, with a 2,000 super high, whatever.
The city council associated with that space.
Yeah.
Strasburg.
That's Barb Warwick. Barb Warwick.
The lines get funky there. For sure.
Yeah, her district's crazy, but she is trying to help facilitate. She's had several task force meetings, bringing everybody to the table. From what I heard at the task force meeting that they just had, the developer was not really willing to lead anything. other than maybe they would have a dog. But they were not gonna put in, sidewalks to get up to Squirrel Hill. So they were gonna leave that to the city to make it a local area. The city is not good.
Who's the developer?
Correct. They are from Toronto. They are being, represented by Ray Baum, who is, on Shock. For the Jewish Museum of British.
Well, thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Great, I know that it's, but, and then I did another statement, just follow up about, I had at the beginning of the year asked about, communication around policies. I saw the policies was actually on the agenda for today. I was concerned about the pregnancy policy as it was written, that, and I had asked about bringing things like that, the ECS community be more involved in, and I guess my wonder is, again, this is not a case discussion, but I wonder how parents can better interact with the board so that the board is able to see kind of what. So I see BCS as kind of two different pieces, right? There's the nonprofit piece, which you guys are the board of, there's also a school, right? And you guys are in charge of making sure that the school is financially stable and following the regulations as they stand, but also it's a school. And I don't know that parent concerns are always heard or addressed in a way that parents feel. So even if you hear the concerns and try to address them, that is not then relayed back to the parents. And I know that since COVID and since the expansion into this new middle school and the high school, that the sense of community at ECS has really felt broken. I mean, I joined during COVID, so I just hear stories about the way it used to be and that everybody used to feel real connected. People kind of reminisce about the good old days, and I think it was easier when there was just the two little, everything was right there. But I know that there was strategic planning and that there was a task force about communication, and I'm just wondering how can that be used to fix this problem? I don't see it being addressed, but that might just be because I'm on there for those conversations, and then those conversations aren't relayed in a way of, we hear you, thank you for sharing that, and I'm going to follow up with you after we've addressed that, right? I was told that we would follow up after the pregnancy thing. I'm like, yeah, we'll talk about that. But that was, I'm in a parent thing, but I don't know anything about it. I don't know if we discussed it other than saying we discussed it. And that doesn't feel fair. Thank you.
Thanks for that feedback. I will say that the concerns are heard and we discuss it, but I think there are opportunities for us to communicate in families. And just that, we see it's on the agenda, it's been kind of ongoing conversation and how we can improve in that area. So yeah, please know that concerns are heard. But yeah, we'll work on it. Rosie, I'll turn to you. Yeah.
Well, thank you all for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Rosie Reed, and my daughter just finished up her third grade year at ECS. We have been super grateful for a strong and loving community here for the past 3 years, and the hardworking and kind teachers and leaders we have experienced. In addition to being a UCS parent, I'm also a career educator specializing in improving literacy instruction in public schools and school systems. I'd like to talk tonight about issues with the units of study curriculum at UCS and its impact on students' mastery and literacy in the content areas. In the last few years, criticism has heightened of units of study as well as other balanced literacy curriculum because they are not aligned with the research and science on becoming a school reader. The New York City Department of Education has recently banned the units of study curriculum from its schools, and news outlets such as the New York Times, as well as organizations like the NAACP, have ramped up reporting and commentary on the inequities created by this curriculum and the startling lack of knowledge about learning to read that its founder and writer, Lucy Hawkins, has. The issue most reported on is the lack of systematic and explicit phonics instruction, and I have been heartened to hear that since last year, UCS no longer relies on the units of study for phonics instruction and is implementing UFLI Foundations, which is an excellent phonics program. However, the units of study and the balanced literacy model continue to be used for reading comprehension and writing instruction at UCS. And this is a problem for our kids for two other critical reasons. The first is that reading comprehension improves based on a reader's knowledge about the topic they are reading about. And so in alignment with that science, strong curriculum are organized into units that systematically build students' knowledge about particular topics and associated vocabulary through text sets on those topics. For example, the Civil War, segregation, reptiles. By contrast, in the units of study curriculum, there are not opportunities for systematic knowledge building about topics. While some of the texts are worthwhile, they are not paired with other texts that build students' understanding and vocabulary about the same topic. In addition to this, at least in our experience at the primary and intermediate school, there do not seem to be dedicated classes and clear scopes and sequences for teaching social studies and science. The second reason it's a problem for our kids is that they need to be reading increasingly complex texts in order to meet the demands of grade level standards and be prepared to succeed beyond high school. The texts and units of study unevenly meet grade level complexity bars. Additionally, in the units of study curriculum, students spend a significant amount of class time reading their own selected reading material at their independent reading levels, instead of being supported to grapple with challenging grade level text with the guidance and questioning of UCS teachers. The balanced literacy approach is detrimental for all students, but it is particularly damaging for students who come in performing below grade level, and as a result, never get much exposure to on-grade level text in this curriculum. This widens the opportunity gap, and it disproportionately impacts students of color, students with learning and thinking differences, and other historically marginalized groups. 20 years ago, Joel Klein, the former chancellor of New York City Department of Education, mandated that all of the city's elementary schools were to adopt Lucy Hawkins' balanced literacy curriculum. I was a teacher in a New York City public school in that era, and initially became a devotee of Lucy Hawkins through the training I received. Joel Klein has since and repeatedly said that adopting that curriculum was the only decision he made as chancellor that he came to regret, and not because the curriculum lacked the Under Klein's leadership, the city eventually adopted a separate phonics supplement, which resulted in reading scores improving at lower grade levels. However, scores did not rise at 8th grade, and Klein believes this is because students did not have knowledge building curriculum. I know that UCS is committed to meeting the needs of all students and doing away with achievement and opportunity gaps. A huge way to improve equity at UCS is to improve literacy instruction by adopting strong knowledge building curriculum and providing strong support for implementation of that curriculum. It hurts my heart to say that we will be moving our family to another school this coming year. I truly hope that this action is taken, and I believe it will really benefit all students at UCS. For more information on these issues, I encourage looking into the Knowledge Matters campaign, the Opportunity Net, the recent articles in the New York Times, and Natalie Webster's reporting in Forbes and Atlantic. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. We felt really fortunate to be a part of this debate.
Would you like to read your statement with us?
Oh, sure.
Thank you so much.
Do you mind if I send a copy? Or you don't?
Sure.
Do I send it to? Okay.
Any questions for Rachel? You're both more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hopefully everybody had an opportunity to look at the board minutes from last month's meeting, and then the financial reports. I don't know if anybody has any questions about any of those payments. Is the, I don't know how to say this, anyway, is the restroom cladding, is that, with the restoration that we've?
That's right, ongoing restoration here at the school.
Okay.
Up into a couple of the restrooms, if you're looking at open the restrooms with the greenish cladding, that continues on the upper floor.
Does that offset operational costs, like as far as repainting, graffiti, things like that?
I would argue, yes.
I guess just for the benefit of consideration, it'd be nice to acknowledge some of those offsets of costs. As some of our detailed conversations around facility costs and just operational savings and making some of these more strategic, longer term type things, there is a return on these costs. So while we're certainly evaluating stagnant costs of, 13 and $9,000, what's that payback period? Are you repainting bathrooms every 6 months or every year? What's that return? That's just helpful just to see from a fiduciary standpoint. Opportunities, I think it's low hanging fruit, but otherwise points to some of the good, solid management decisions, towards these kinds of items.
Sure. Maybe in our committee meeting, Matthew, we can talk about what that mechanism might look like.
Yep.
Which you see examples of that and our journey, or at least our reporting journey, that would be really helpful.
Certainly.
Today, we don't do that, but that's really good.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, it's a, TV upgrade at the end of the year.
Just a question about the lease, because I thought this was quotes or invoices over 10,000. Is there, but it looks like that's only $1,935. Is that number correct?
Yeah, that's right, we just wanted to include that.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Were there any other costs that I have questions about? I'll just note that we have Megan on the phone, so we now have an official forum to vote. Megan, I don't know if you had an opportunity to look at the minutes or the financial reports, if you have any questions before we vote on consent agenda.
Thanks, Lisa. No questions.
All right, resolution 2023-6-2087, be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the school that the consent agenda for June 21st, 2023 be approved. First, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Okay. Megan, if you can hold on for a few more minutes, we have some other things to vote on. We had another board candidate, David Turner, who had attended a few meetings early in the year. He's not here today, but We would like to add him to the Board of Trustees. His resume was circulated, so hopefully everybody had an opportunity to look at that. And he has a background in legal and education, which is kind of a unique, I think, like taught K-12 and was a lawyer at the same time, multi-talented. So I think as the term is ending for some of us with the legal and educational backgrounds, it'll be a nice addition to bring him on. So we'll move to vote. So resolution 2023-6-2088 be resolved by the Board of Trustees of the school that the board membership of David Turner be approved. Make a motion for a second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thanks. All right, so moved. While we are talking about board membership, this is not on the agenda, so sorry, tell me I forgot to add it ahead of time. But as I just mentioned, we will have a few vacancies at the end of this term. Sapna is rolling off, Meryl is rolling off, I am rolling off, Dan is rolling off, Sarah won't be returning, and neither will Angela. So that will create quite a few opportunities. So I won't rain on your parade and saying like how much you've been recruiting for next year. But I did want to talk about the slate for next year. We talked about this last month. We're proposing that Adam will serve as the president, Kristen will serve as vice chair, Megan will serve as the treasurer, and then Brandon will serve as the secretary. And this will go into effect August for the start of the new school year. So I would like to vote on that. So maybe, can I make this like -2090? Sequence here, sorry. All right, put that up there. All right, so resolution 2023-6-2090 be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the school that the proposed slate for the 2023-2024 school year be approved as outlined earlier. Get it first. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any objections? All right, so moved. Yes, that's all. All right, and then the last thing that we have to vote on is the school budget that was reviewed with us previously. That was also solicited for folks to look at. So we'll go ahead and vote for approval unless anybody has any questions or concerns before we move to that vote. Okay. All right, resolution 2023-06-2089 be resolved by the Board of Trustees of the school that the 2023-2024 school budget be approved. Thank you. First, second, all in favor?
Right.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Aye, so moved. Thank you.
So we're gonna add in, again, we've dropped something off the consent agenda, we just wanted to pass it around, but just make sure it's one more comment. And if there's somebody on the telephone, we should get one here. I've got a resolution. This is 91.
Megan, we're just reviewing one other topic.
It is a
Okay,
sole
thanks.
contract for an architecture firm to review the adjacent building to our current high school, our temporary high school. There is some potential space in there that needs to get up to code, and so we've engaged the architectural firm, Walnut Chalmers, to do that work on our behalf. They were the folks that did this school for us, so we acknowledge their work. They're going to do two pieces of work for us. One, quickly review the school and give us a rough estimate of how much it might cost to get that building up to code, so we can use it or zoned as a school. And secondly, We need to move the trailers that are existing in the front parking lot to the back parking lot, and they're gonna handle that for us, so the costs are not.
So this is a building owned by the church?
It is right next to our current temporary high school. It's part of the same complex, but it doesn't have an occupancy permit. And we want some experts to take a look and see if we can actually.
But it's the church's property?
It does belong to the diocese, yes.
Okay.
And the intent would be to lease this space?
Yes. I mean, the work being done, that would be for next year,
For the second school.
not the upcoming school year. I think it's helping the following school year.
Is there any type of LOI or other business terms that's been floated with the school yet to understand the framework with the deal, or are we only at really the early stages of determining feasibility?
Yeah, we certainly had a conversation with the diocese. They're willing and able and happy for us to take it on. It certainly provides ample space whether we need to use it all or not, but they're not in a position to do this work. If we're interested, we need to do it ourselves. So I think the idea would be, if it's something that we're interested in doing, whatever financial contribution would be turned around as rent, as prepaid rent. So that would be the mechanism. Whether it's going to be viable or not, it will be depending on the number that comes back here from Walton Insurance.
Okay.
And how big of a space is it?
It's about 40,000 square feet. So think of one of our elementary schools, a little bigger than one of those. It's good size.
Okay, it's just empty.
It's empty. So it's an interesting prospect.
Is the church still a church?
It is.
Just
The parish still is active in the space, and so we work with dioceses who are happy to rent those empty school buildings.
So is the ask right now, and I'm going to narrate a little bit for Megan's benefit, the ask is really to advance certain dollars for phase one, which is moving trailers to the rear of the property. Megan, that's a $5,900 ask. And phase two, which is $8,900, which is a due diligence study to evaluate the viability of this site for our use. Is that the ask just for these two dollar amounts at this point? And phase three, if there is a feasibility, Megan, would be to, they'd come back to us and ask for additional monies based on a more defined scope if the site is viable.
All right, thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, and if it is viable, we'll get our finance and facilities committee to walk through it and take a look, and we'll kick those ties together. But this just gets us off the ground, understanding that this is possible.
And if we then pay for all that infrastructure, and we are still paying rent,
So we would, whatever monies that would be thrown into the work would be turned around and credited.
okay.
They don't know that yet. That's the.
Like, they're getting away with stuff.
That's right.
Right.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
right.
Right,
It's
okay.
ultimately the beneficiary. So, yeah, we can't negotiate, but ultimately, how we do that, we will say, how willing they are. We don't know.
And we're not thinking about buying this building. Okay, got it.
Is that on the table? Is the diocese even willing?
I think as we get in there and we discuss this more, I think that there's always that potential. Right now, they'd like to rent it out to the parish. Interested in maintaining the control of that building. It's right in the heart of that neighborhood. And then lots of the parishes particularly feel like selling at this point. That doesn't mean to say in the future that might change.
To Sapna's point, though, I don't want to come in and create all this value and then turn around and all of a sudden it's a lottery ticket that we're giving them back.
That's
So,
right. So a lengthy lease would require that too. So we get what we get out of it. But ultimately, we might not rent it all, right? It might be just a portion, so.
are they willing to make any financial contribution to this at all?
They're chatting around a very basic one, which is roof and skin. But digging down into that, what does that mean? What are the details?
But that's where I was going, just from Park Place and those conversations, at a minimum, they should own the superstructure and whatnot, so.
Yeah, I think we're working with our eyes wide open on this one.
Is there any contingency built into these numbers, especially in phase one? You know, things when it comes to code, $5,900 to move trailers. I'm just wondering what that scope entails. I mean, I see the bullets, but I know that can be fraught with issues and that number can easily double and triple. So I didn't know if there was contingency in any of this, or is this just hard bids from?
That's the hard bit. I mean, my back of the envelope, I think it's a good deal for us, given the pitfalls. The last time we engaged in this, it was not an easy situation. The city has made mobile buildings that are really difficult space to maneuver in. Excuse the pun. So I think $5,900. Thanks. There is no contingency. We'll hold them to. Thank you very much. We will move these things. Beginning zoning, there's a traffic study that will be needed as part of this, as we all know, no doubt. This disruption parking at the rear of the building. That's going to be an additional cost that's going to come for us if this is viable.
I don't see exclusions specifically in this agreement. Granted, this is just being presented to us. Oftentimes in these kinds of agreements, what they exclude is oftentimes what you ultimately need and why that doubles and triples. So I don't know if there's anything beyond this agreement, you know, that's being presented to us that's for further consideration. If not, I would just caution to make sure that you have those conversations, eyes wide open, understanding, are there any exclusions with Wildman and company? Again, there's so many different angles on these things.
Agreed. I noted, and Matthew, maybe if you, at our next meeting, we can go through what the potential exclusions might be. So our next conversation with Wildman, as we approve this, again, we just capture those.
Yeah. Otherwise, agree. I mean, the dollar values being considered here seem like it's good value, but devil's advocate. That's all I have.
All right, so I'll read the resolution, if that's all right. So it would be, resolved by the Board of Trustees of the school that the Wildman Children's Facility Review Contract be approved. And it is 2023-6-2021.
Can we add the total amount to that resolution, please? Is that a fair ask?
What is the total?
13,14,8. My math's correct.
Okay. Okay.
Motion.
Okay. Second. All in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? So moved. Sorry about that. All right.
Do we still need to make it on
Uh,
the voting?
We're done with voting. Thank you, Megan, for joining us.
Do you want to stay on and listen on, Megan, or?
You know, I'm heading to the tunnel.
Okay, fair enough. As you cut out. Thank you if you can hear us.
All right, so let's move on to some board discussions. So maybe John, you can give an update on policies and where we are with digitizing.
Yeah, policies. At our last board meeting, the board brought up the need for an overarching policy review and ultimately to understand what that process might look like. So we did a little due diligence in the background alongside our law firm to understand what that might be. We had a conversation with the executive committee this last month to understand, okay, what should we chat about? So today's conversation with the board is to just provide you with our very much draft process, right? And for you to provide any suggestion along the way and help us work your way through this. So one of the challenges we needed to take our enormous policy behind this over the last 15 years. And that has been done. The vast majority of our policies have been written and created through our law firm. And so we went back to McKenna and said, we'd like you to go ahead and take these, travel, one of the boards come up, back up to Philly, they digitized, returned back to us, and the process looks like the following, that every single one of our policies really needs to be reviewed through that lens, and ultimately headed back to us and go through a public process to evaluate, to add any internal procedures, and then approve it. So we look to do this, right? So they would like to prioritize and bundle and thematically divide these things up, as they have been before. They wanted to start with some review of our website and to ultimately evaluate those and understand from a compliance standpoint what needs to be on a website and how it's facing. They're doing that work currently. That bundle will come down and thus starts the process. They view this as probably a year-long journey, maybe longer, but just ship on. So the thought is that we will pull together a committee internal, and the question is whether we will representative on that to begin the process of review. So the legal team will review them, write them, send them down. We'll then check them, walk through if there's bound to be typos, mistakes, and things that don't apply to us. Then send them back for their final check. They'll come to us again in an electronic form. The thought is that they will be uploaded on board docs on the website for public review over the course of a month. Then we will come back to the board and ultimately vote it in and add a meeting in small bundles, because I think Randy, myself, and Marissa from Student Services and beyond will make up that committee to review those and write up procedures associated with those, get those up onto board docs. We do not use board docs currently, so we have to, the idea is to have that all in place by end of the year so we can start this process. The parent came in and chatted today about, how do we make this transparent and provide access for every single one of our policies. There's a lot and a lot more coming too. And so there we can jump in. So that's basically, if I've got anything, the thought of the process ongoing through the year, probably more than we thought. As I said, that this, digitizing, organizing, and getting these policies up onto the website has been in our strategic plan for 2 rounds, and there's a reason why it gets pushed down the pike, because it is an enormous, long undertaking. So we chatted to the law firm, and they promised to use their most reasonable intern to do some of this work. And when I say reasonable, I have a billing rate to do this. But so there we are. There. So I throw that out to the board. And to if there's anything that's flawed there, or you feel you need a representation in the middle of that, that would be the ongoing cycle of just part of a journey work. Some of these things are not particularly fun to look at. They're just large tomes of text. But ultimately, by the end of this process, we will have a comprehensive review. All of our policies will be organized thematically and up view for our community, and ultimately we can put our hands on our heart and say, okay, we had a thorough review, and we feel like compliance is where it needs to be. So that's the journey.
It's, I'm sure your lawyers are thrilled to hear about this. I'm sure they said it would take a year. That's how they get paid, I guess. But no, it sounds like a pretty good plan to me. I guess one of my questions is in terms of, obviously you want to consult with the lawyers, especially if they were involved in developing these policies and they have some expertise in developing similar policies with other institutions. But I guess one of my questions from our standpoint, I guess from your standpoint, are there Do you know if there's any benchmarking with respect to what other charter schools or what other schools in general do in terms of this type of policy review, and how do they decide which policies will be public facing, or if there are any policies that sort of don't need to be public or shouldn't be public facing? Another issue that I just don't know what the standards are, but I'm interested in this from a standpoint of flexibility for the school, is that, at least in some of my reading about this, it seems that some boards, there's sort of board policies, and there's kind of subordinate policies and procedures that don't need board approval necessarily, which obviously gives some flexibility to updating or changing policies. With, everything has to go through the board. Obviously, that's a much more time-consuming process. And I don't know if either from your lawyers or just from discussions with other schools or what other schools are doing, if you have any insight into that.
There are certainly annual compliance policies that we can develop and often publish at the state level. We can just pull them out and we can upload them. However, to that is that we haven't had this comprehensive review since we started. We just added, so I think this is a good goal, and just stop, take a look. In terms of fate of the law firm and their connection to best practice, I think that there isn't a better group at this point in the state of Pennsylvania, especially with charter school expertise than McKenna. So I think we're in really, really great hands with this particular group. They probably have the best expertise when it comes to producing most of these things. So in terms of best practice, what might be handed to us to review internally, I think that is, we should have that conversation with McKenna. I think what we might do is have him come down, we'll build labs, of course, but come down and talk to the board in August and September, at the beginning of that process. I thought that the cycle needs to be done within the school year, so people engaged in that part. He's paying attention to this. So I think we could ask those questions and see if we can carve some cost out of this around some of the.
That's sort of what I'm thinking. There may be policies that are in perfectly good shape, or that don't require necessarily board approval, or that don't necessarily require a public hearing. I just don't know enough about. Obviously, there's certain core policies that would be very important and public, and but other things that maybe aren't, especially if they're, like as you said, tones of things. Not everything is going to be equal, and you don't want to. Your resources, you want to keep your powder dry, I guess. Right?
I think there are folks out there that have done this more recently than us, and I think we're going to benefit from their journey. Board Docs is certainly the portal that most districts, or we see increasingly districts using as a way to, for community board members and anyone else, including our internal folks, to access those as they need them, rather than coming down to the office and in a big file.
Yeah.
So I'm not familiar with Board Docs.
It is, it's one of these things, of course, it's got plenty of layers to this, but we intend to use it as within our website, the Board Doc button, and with it, you can then click through all of the response, well organized by theme. So it does that really well. PPS uses it, and then we can the list goes.
Yeah, I think I'll add, I think this, I like this plan as you're laying it out, and, in response to public comment earlier in the year, I think the board requested that we send more specific emails about what the board is doing each month, and there is and thank you for following through with that. I now, as a parent, get an email every month. This is the board agenda, and I know that parents have to subscribe to that, but I think that's a good plan. If we are going to be voting on a policy, let's put it up there a month before, give people a chance to review it. And if we have all of this on a central, in a central place on the website, I think that just adds to our goal of communication and transparency with the community. So I like the direction that is going, and
agree with everything Stan said.
Right, that would be the test, right, that can we, in our communications, monthly communication, can we send, hey, this board meeting is upcoming, here's the link to board docs, and this is the bundle of policies. I think our journey, that starts will be, are there too many for families to get through, or, are there the right ones? And I think we may get some feedback from the way that says, okay, slow it down a little bit, this is where we go beyond the year, but we're gonna have to do this on a monthly cycle, right? Get it something wrong. So I would say when we see August, I think we'll pass the first group, our goal would be pass the first group in September.
And I think there's a messaging challenge, maybe as well, in terms of you of course want to be transparent, and as it's been repeated a few times tonight, I think the theme, that people want to feel like they're included in the process, they have knowledge. On the other hand, things that, like certain policies, especially policies that have compliance and legal overtones, it can't really effectively be open to plebiscite in terms of, every person in the community having a vote on how they think this, a particular policy ought to be. Obviously, some are going to be more controversial or where you would want public comment more than others. And I don't know how you balance those things necessarily, but I assume that would, because obviously in some cases you're going to want to have control over that process and be able to say to parents, thank you for your comments, but this is how we're going to do it at our school, and these are, we need to get legal advice on these things. And,
Yeah, the board's aware, said, okay, let's cover the compliance and outpacing requirements first. That is what you need out there before you do anything else. And so that's where the journey starts. I know when we started this, we talked about policies that were focused in on board governance. Maybe that can be our second bundle. But we can chat to the lawyers as they come in September, arrange for them to sort of potentially August to sit in front of us to talk about the process. Get them with some good questions there.
I think it'd be,
It would be like a 2-month process for each bundle in a way. I hate to say that, but like, if you have them up, well, maybe because, you have the 1 month where everything's up on the website, then you have the board meeting, there's public comment. We're not going to then vote those ones in, not at that meeting, after just hearing all the public comments in case there is something that's more than to. So it's like 2 months.
Public comment will disrupt the entire process.
but to the earlier point, it can be confusing too, because even if you do it on a rolling basis where you're voting certain ones in, but you're discussing the ones that you're talking 30 days, you're going to be voting on 30 days later, it's always unclear on which ones you're voting on, where comments are and are not integrated. There needs to be a feedback loop mechanism where you're communicating what things were and were not heard, what was integrated and what wasn't integrated, and here's why in some cases. In some cases, it might be law. This is how we have to proceed. But I think, in all of these kinds of situations, more time is going to be needed, and I think a more thoughtful approach. So I guess personally, my ask would be to better understand what the process and the schedule that McKenna is recommending to us, and I think we can weight some of the actions thereafter. The other big ask I would have is clearly we're all acknowledging how heavy of a lift this process is going to be. It's been 10, 15 years, whatever, in the making from when some of these policies were first, done. What is the sustainable systemic actions that are going to happen every 2 years, 5 years, whatever those cycles need to be, so it's not such a heavy lift going forward. Some of these might necessitate, they need to be reviewed every year. Got it. That should be a small group, but some of these shouldn't be, being stagnant 10, 15 years. They should be looking at every 5 years just from a best practices standpoint.
Sure. And this is where the conversation started.
Yep.
This
Yeah,
is a cyclical journey that we can take to land on the top. But something you pointed to one, right? Let's take it slow to begin with, and then the 2 months, those 2 cycles is our first cycle. We'll teach us how to do this well. Later on top of that, it's how do we cycle this thing through. I think our committee that we pull together can jump into that. We'll tell some folks, right? Jump in here and work, but if the board would like some representation, Again, there's no feedback to the board in this process described today, this draft process described today, beyond the executive committee or the structure that's currently in place. And so we're trying to figure out how to do that unless we get board representatives. And that's a bit of a lift for someone to jump in once a month and chat about that work. So that's yet to be.
Who's wondering if you're volunteering someone?
Any of the lawyers in the room right now would be happy.
That'll be the first time.
How about we properly inaugurate?
Right.
Give it to David.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to the board.
I'm sure he would love
We
that.
will not mention any names.
I'm happy to, if they're helping any way.
And then the governance committee potentially add some additional legal counsel onto the board. So that's the board.
So I kind of echo what folks said. Could our next step be some sort of timeline or outline on what the process is going to look like?
Let's get that out to the board. I'll lead back to McKenna and we'll flush this out and we'll send it out to the board as a whole. Let's look for some feedback there. That includes that first sort of general start, and then we'll give it a go. We'll name the committee. We'll put the pieces together, and that's our question. But our hope is, and our goal should be that for August, we keep the process in place, right? When we start the school year, getting this work done. And then as we go from the hard copy, we can upload slowly everything we've done onto Word Docs.
Just in the limited experience that I have doing policy review and things like that, it varies wildly depending on what the policy is. And sometimes you can do 10 policies sort of at once because they're so non-controversial, whereas you'll have other policies that you need everybody's input, and obviously it depends on how much input you need from different constituencies and how much you're willing to tolerate. I mean, you have other policies that can take 6 months or longer to really feel that you're doing a competent job reviewing it. So I think it's good to have a plan. I think flexibility also. What I would.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a learning curve to start off too, so that's something to factor. I'd be remiss if I had asked, do we have money budgeted? I know we just put it on the budget, but I don't think that was line itemed. Do we have money budgeted for this? Just overall legal? Was it in addition to our typical? Okay.
And something on board docs. So as I'm understanding, there'll be a forward-facing portal for families and the community. Will there be a portal for internal staff? I'm thinking about like just teachers having access to different policies that may not be forward-facing. I don't know, like would HR ones be forward-facing or is that, okay,
I think all policies.
got it, okay,
Every single policy out there. So,
okay.
so I think it's the same portal. I know we can jump in. Our folks use them fairly frequently. And right now they put them down, you either copy it off, take it up, switch it up, so it's something.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, thank you. I mean, I know we've we've been asking for a while. It's a huge lift. I know that it is, but I think it puts us in a good position.
Let's stop the avoidant behavior here. This is really, really good work.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
It is.
Everyone's going to have a lot of bedtime reading, thousands of pages.
Yeah, exciting.
It will be good solid work. And actually, 6 months out, we're going to have a routine down. And I think this juncture, we'll get it out in public. We've long wanted this out. So I'm excited to get it done. Excited to get it stretch. Keen to get it done.
All right, let's move on to student transportation system. Yeah.
Again, a conversation recently with the board and that transportation here at the middle school. It's for public schools, longest time transported kids in our middle school, and then arbitrarily last year took it away and said we're no longer going to pay for transportation here at the middle school. That was problematic. Ultimately, what we did was we rushed in and paid the bus company to continue those services. We continue to do that at a cost of around $270,000 a year. Considerable number of dollars pushed towards that. The way it's structured now is a current bus company that services a number of our schools. We simply just paid them to fill the gap. They are already contracted through Pittsburgh Public Schools, and so it's really difficult for us to maneuver or influence that bus company, yet we're a paying customer. It has a negative influence on the fact that our kiddos run several buses. It has a negative impact on our ability to shift schedules for our little ones and our high school kids. And so it reduces flexibility and it increases the number of the time students are on the bus. For the board, we've had this conversation. We've looked at solutions. We've looked at the potential of can we get out from this particular bus company, the current state of bus companies. There is a little bit of competition. We're in danger of losing the one bus company we have, and ultimately, we don't want to do that. That would be a really tough situation for us. We have taken the school district to the state, and we've had that conversation. The state is not going to back us. Ultimately, they walked away from that. So we're left with solutions on our own. At this juncture, I think the only journey forward for us is for us to buy buses to run our own system. We've clearly got a budget in front of us of $270,000 to cover that. That would be the purchase of yellow school buses, personnel to manage those buses. That's mechanical, servicing, drivers, hiring, you name it. And so with that, it would provide us great flexibility to shift times for other schools. It would reduce the length of journeys for our little ones, and provide us greater flexibility. And if we own buses at this juncture, these are the large yellow school buses, it provides us some internal capacity for save some dollars in terms of field trips and so on and so forth. So that is the journey and the solution. Obviously, we don't particularly, as an environmental charter school, relish the thought of buying diesel buses and putting diesel, diesel vehicles onto the road. So I think we would go for DEP grants to see if we can electrify along the way. But ultimately, this is a journey I think we could solve, and the infrastructure we can put in place for not this upcoming school year, but the following school year. So that is the journey that we're considering at this point. I throw that out to the board for a conversation, any input, and any suggestion.
We don't have enough.
We just know what costs. Currently, $270,000.
And this is just middle school?
This is just middle school. Everything else is transported. Now, there is another factor to this, whether we want to go a little bit further, and we'll certainly look at this. Right now, the charter school is on the hook for legally, and we do this and have done it for 15 years to specialize in transportation. The students with IEP, or students with a special need that requires transportation. We cover all of that, and that's in the law. And the current cost for that is just north of $400,000. So the aggregate cost between those two is considerable for a school. So as we build a fleet, it may well pay for us to extend that fleet to cover those that infrastructure or that challenge as well. We don't have to at this point, but the cost is getting out of control at this point. And it is a point where we could consider it, we could offer up the structure, the infrastructure that we have put in place to other schools too. So there are neighboring charter schools that are also suffering from this. I'm meeting with tomorrow, chats with some other CEOs, and potentially, if we put the structure in place, we can offer it up as it becomes a network heading through the city. But, being held hostage, our students being held hostage, our parents, the service being downgraded because of a private enterprise, is not okay. So, we had a conversation at the executive level. That's a body of work that needs to be done. So,
Have we looked at, or do we have any idea about the ability to actually staff the buses with drivers? I mean, obviously labor's been an issue. And I assume there would be specialized driver's licenses. I mean, is it possible we go down the path of getting the buses, but then we're in a real pickle with getting people on them?
yeah, all of the above, right?
Okay.
We go in there, can we pay more? Can we entice the drivers to stick with us? It's a better place. At one point, there were drivers out there, drivers that work for other folks that work for us as well. So it's not easy, perhaps, but one we want to solve. And again, if we start just with middle school, not a ton of routes. Money back so really was listening to I guess you guys would help me.
Yeah, that portion of it is slightly complicated. Right now, as it stands, we have 10 routes across the district. So that's from K through 8th grade all together. Once you split middle school from that, I would assume that you would probably cut those routes in half, but you would have to map them as far as how you're going to fit all those students.
Oh, the FedEx system, what is it, what you're
I think I had a car once.
But including parking lots, these things somewhere, you need personnel to manage them every day. When people don't show up to drive a bus, that's our responsibility to get a bus driver. So it's not a small undertaking. However, the cost to the organization, as you heard, is considerable at this point. And I think we always have a responsibility to drive down costs, so more dollars go towards teachers and students. This is something that we've grown about and known about what we have at this point. Done about, I think that's how event. We had that conversation. We mentioned electrification. Immediately let our foundation know, and they're doing a little work to take a look at what those grants are. There's some considerable grants out there.
Well, I'll say as a parent, the kid who gets out at 3:50 and gets home at 5:20 and travels from here to Squirrel Hill to Green Tree to West End and beyond. As a parent, I would love that. To get them home early and be here. I think a lot of families
Short trips. It's a health issue. It's kids being ready for
They're
school.
exhausted.
They're denied getting into really great after-school programs because they're at home early.
Yeah.
I think there's a ton of reasons why we need to do this work. It's not, nobody gets an education to work on bus routes, but this is an infrastructure that has a direct impact on the quality of the service that ECS has to offer. And it also costs us a ridiculous amount of money. So those tax dollars are heading to a private enterprise that, we're a nonprofit, and I think, if we start a new nonprofit to cover, this entity, it gets complicated, but I think it's what needs to be done.
And just so I think I was just coming onto the board when this issue was already ongoing, just so I make sure I understand exactly that they are required by Pennsylvania law to provide transportation, right? And I don't want to get into any legal issues that need to be in executive session or anything, but I mean, I guess are there any other options on the table in terms of, or is it our understanding that they, there's not much of an argument that they can be made to comply with the law or our understanding of the law?
Yeah, the latter. There's a couple of cases here in Pennsylvania where it was challenged. They lost the next level, lost again. Ultimately, I think if the district provides, it's been found that if the district provides bus passes, that they've met their obligation, which is not okay. And anyone, can test. There's a well-known test out there that doesn't pass it, right? That ultimately providing a child, especially a little new sixth grader, a
Right.
small child, essentially, until you can catch a Piazza bus in the middle of January with no infrastructure, with no protections, is unforgivable. And so any entity that goes down that road and says that I've provided you or met my obligations, it's not okay. It's not making the right choice in front of kids, and so I have no patience for that. We can't win that, so I think it's up to us to go ahead and do the right thing, people run on. That's we are. Yeah, shame to say that we were at the adult points mistake and said, these folks owe us money here, $280,000. And they said no. Disappointing.
Where were the cases, you know, were they here or were they on the other side of the state?
Philly, I think, but I can get those to you.
I'm certainly interested.
I don't write them in the law firm, just
Don't feel
try
like
our best. We could
Like,
sue, but of course it's going to cost a lot.
like IKEA breathing.
You might be more involved.
But it's interesting, I did ask the law firm, if we get into buses, are there any policies that we need to
Yeah.
think about? Because this is not an area that we're dealing with. What are other policies for transportation students? We take on considerable insurance risks and so on and so forth. So, we already have 3 vans that are fully utilized, that are getting a lot of work right now. Each one of those vans costs us like $5,000 of insurance. When you start putting 70 kids, 60 kids on a bus, it's like that.
And those are being given by our side owners, right?
Yeah, those are the website. So our insurance company requires them to go through a test, it could be a road test, and so on and so forth. So, 20 plus.
They have a pair of school buses too.
Well, funny you should say that.
CDL.
That there are folks within our system, ECS employs a number of folks. You can offer it up and say that we'll provide you, we'll pay for the training, provide that full training system. If you work through, then you can provide you these additional hours. And the hours work well for folks that maybe an hourly employee who suddenly can extend it out. So it's not outside reason to think somebody internally might want to engage in that. So
I'm in.
You see these stories of like parents who or grandparents who recognize like a busing shortage and then go out and get their CDL. Like,
well, there have been many that's the part of the workforce that came out of busing. That when the pandemic hit, a lot of elderly folks that were worried said, "Okay, I'm done. Fixed income, but that's a risk too far." And came out of the system, and they're still recovering from that.
Is there anyone else in the area that does this? I think Shadyside maintains their own fleet of buses, and there's some of their staff drive them. That might be a resource to reach out to.
Yeah.
I don't know if Winchester does or doesn't.
And sometimes you can lease buses, right? So you go to AJ Myers, and if it's a long-term lease, they will place your name on the side. So often, the Shadyside does have a couple of buses that they run. You see them go running through the neighborhood. And so environmental charter school will be written down the side. That'll be ours. But given our mission, it's going to be really, really difficult for us to sort of think about how we do that. We had low emissions on our first vans. So we will be shooting for some level of electrification and then the infrastructure that goes along with that.
You can penny.
You can go down that road. A little thin on the back. So.
No, I think certainly acknowledge the issue and the challenge, that we've been faced with. I would just caution that it's not just financial. By operating a system like this, look at it holistically. Like you said, it's more property, it's off-site. You don't just need 5 buses, you need 6 or 7. You need redundancy. One breaks down, one's in the maintenance shop. You invite all of those additional non-fiduciary risks onto us. What are they? It'd be helpful for us to, I think, see a proper business plan to properly, stomach and evaluate this as you guys go down this journey. Again, that's acknowledging all the upside, but again, I think our role here is also to protect on the downside.
So we start with our current costs, right, as a sort of an outside journey. And then on top of that, on the other side, what are the systemic benefits to our internal fleet, benefit to kids, benefit to staff and beyond, right? And then undoubtedly, yes, that's the body of work, the business plan, and the infrastructure that's necessary. We've got some good models out there. There's another charter school network that's playing with an idea of specialized transportation on the run, right? And there may be some good partners that might want to jump in here and benefit from this system, right? Some smaller charter schools that are not in a similar position for us to go ahead and fight this off.
That's where I
Might
think,
offset our cost and we'll give you some more as part of this.
that's where I think a tax account might be helpful, just from if you're selling services to an unrelated business, or there are UBIT issues and things like that, even a nonprofit. Again, you acknowledge the potential need to split this off as a separate nonprofit. That might be the case, just to compartmentalize risk, but also just from a fiduciary standpoint, and I'm talking out of my element, I know enough to acknowledge the risk, but things like that, you don't want to jeopardize the main school's nonprofit status if somehow that became too successful, for instance. You'd certainly want to make sure that it's its own separate business unit.
So we'll do the work and we'll get those plans in front of this board for review. And again, I think we've got ourselves a school year to work through that and get that established. And the goal being following school year to bring that along. Given the fact that contracted kind of.
Is there any chance, even a theoretical chance, I guess, that it's a future time that I guess whoever's making the decision, the school district, the city, could change their mind about busing? Not to say that they necessarily would, but, things change over time, and how does that impact, if we do go this route of, buying our own fleet, would that have an impact? I guess that's the question.
Like if they start converting.
Yeah, if the politics changes, the attitudes change, the situation changes, I don't know. Just something
Unlikely.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But I think we should look at every contingency, right? I think if anything, they're going to go the other way, right? We did do, just to let the board know, when they first brought this up, we panicked and said, oh my goodness, this is going to be difficult for us. You turned out, a number of our parents helped us out. They went down to the board and said, this is outrageous beyond. And then you turned out that, knowing that the parent voice here at DCS can be loud, make their life difficult if necessary, it was okay. But ultimately it went through. In doing that, we did engage with Port Authority and had a number of meetings with Port Authority and saying, okay, if we're going to be using this infrastructure, is there a way that Port Authority can step up and develop routes, pick up from school, add routes? That was a very difficult and not terribly fruitful. Lots of goodwill, but that's a structure that is deeply ingrained in local board, state monies, and it's very difficult to.
Yeah.
Commended this, patted us on the head, and sent us on our way.
Well, I'll just say thank you for all of the efforts that you have gone through over the last year. I mean, we know the alternatives that kids would take.
Yeah.
Bucks are over there on that PRT. For some families, that be 2 or 3 buses starting very, very early in the morning. So, yeah, and just for being creative and thinking about alternative solutions. So, yeah, I think you can get us some plans and thoughts and numbers.
The goal would be by end of summer, August, we will get a more defined plan. I guarantee it's going to be complete, but a more defined plan for us to review and move forward.
Sort of related, but I think if where our conversation started in the first place about this was about high schoolers needing to squeeze in and certain people. And I know we talked about this before, but would love, and then that's how this bus conversation started, because we thought we had more flexibility with the other buses. So just don't want to forget that point whenever it becomes relevant
Indeed, indeed.
and a possibility, because we should be sort of driven by science and
And the science.
the health benefits for certain users. So I know that's not a now possibility, but
Indeed.
that's
Not for now.
Taking back control. Not to elicit Brexit.
All right, I'll move this along. So the next is about the dashboard. We started that conversation last month, or maybe even the month before, around having some forward-facing metrics and outcomes for the board and for the community to look at.
We met with Qualtrics, a company, anybody who's familiar with those folks, I'm gonna rope it over there. About these things. Again, a company that specializes in gathering lots of information across your organization and turning it into something that's really viewable, and certainly they know lots of ways to digest that data and make it pretty, and ultimately turn it outward so communities can see anything from attendance to how long board members stick around and look backwards and forwards and all kinds of things. You name it, they can do it. So a really fruitful meeting today. Certainly, it's great. It's many school districts use it. The academic team were there and they grilled them a little. They were tough on them, and said, okay, right, let's talk about some of the platforms that we use and will it integrate? Will it talk to each other? Because many of these companies will chat to you and say, oh, yes, absolutely, that would be fine, until the day comes that you want to pull that data from home or whatever your SIS is, and things don't go to plan. One thing the academic team wants is to be able to look at our data easily, simply, and drill right down, right? Let's talk about eligible content, talk about individual students in front of that eligible content, subgroups of students, and get in right in there. And can Qualtrics, what it costs we're going to grab, can they do that work? We couldn't answer that question today, Dr. Elwright. So we're going to set up a following follow-up meeting. Take a look. So that's where we go there.
Yeah, it might do what we want it to do globally for data and outward facing, but it doesn't necessarily do what my team needs internally for data. So it's just a board applications and workflow.
I should, does anyone know Rohit crossover there? Rohit being a prospective board member, this is your area, you do this for a living.
What I told him.
We had a really long conversation about what we want to leverage, right? So no doubt we'll get dragged in, jump into this, really good along the way. But this is where we're at in that conversation. How do we produce a picture of who we are, the work we do, in front of the constituents that need to look at that? We don't do that well currently. We're not sophisticated in that position. So,
No, that's fine. I mean, that's just essentially that push and pull. So it might be great in one aspect, but it might not help us save time. Essentially, what we're doing is that data crunching, data analysis individually in Excel, putting it out to staff, and there's that time lag, which is not ideal when you're talking about student data and attendance data.
to me, I feel like that's more important.
Yeah.
What you need is more important.
Right.
I mean, I think the other piece of it is great. But you need to be able to use it. It's the same stuff with our policy. Like, okay, yes, we need to digitize everything, but we also want them to be, we want to be able to use them. There's the strategic plan. It's beautiful, but we want to use it. So like, we need something that you like.
Yeah.
I think that's not cool. Personally, but I mean, that's just me.
and I know somebody wanted to look at these, and of course, we chose to pull down the screen. As you see all the scaffolding up here, we're getting a wonderful screen that we press a button, stand. There, it's gonna be great, but not today. It's gonna be around.
Are these programs like one size fits all, or are they, do they have the capability to be modified to fit your needs?
But what we need to do, they don't do. Currently, or at least they want to stay, they're wanting to do a little more digging to see if they are able to do what they can.
Are there other companies out there that you explore?
I think we need to.
Yeah.
It's not doing exactly what it
Yeah.
needs to be.
Yeah.
And we got some resources. Both on the board.
I mean, no pressure whatsoever. You thought you were just coming to listen.
No onboarding process.
But I agree, it needs to function, and there's no sense in spending money if it's not gonna do what you need it to do, so.
When I would just further echo, it needs to be an off the shelf, because if you get too far down the road with a customized system, it'll work for you, but all of a sudden your fees start to creep, and all of a sudden you can't go anywhere because it's custom for you.
Right.
Off the shelf gives you options down the road. It's going through a space system process, and we were adamant it needs to be an off the shelf system. So if we pivot 5 years from now, we can pivot to another off the shelf system to keep our costs down and keep it as a bidding process. So it's, again, to your point, Mandy, it needs to work for you all. What do you want to be measured by? And I think we as the board, we're happy to, cherry pick what we care out of that and have that report up to our dashboard, but it needs to work for you all first.
And, the story you want to tell, right? What is the story and our strategic plan, our mission, and what do we do? We need to make sure it's properly. Who is telling the story for consumers, right? So, still slightly unsure of what let's be firm about the story we want to tell, and then we can move on. Portrait certainly a solid hour and a half of listening to some folks on hard sell.
So that's all educational focused, right?
Operations and education, right?
Okay, just a couple data points or notes that I wrote down for like board level dashboard would be more on the finance side, just having a regular year over year comparison for budget tracking. Understanding that, figure that's low hanging fruit.
Budget components, right?
Around people, just understanding how our teacher, or really staff pay tracks compared to our peers and where we are in those rankings. I see that in the Business Times, just on average teacher pay and things like that across all the districts. That goes to more towards our retention numbers. Really, how are we tracking? That's a component of it. I think would be helpful for us to acknowledge, just to get out ahead of anything. On the facility side of things, understanding kind of your backward log of deferred maintenance, what that number is, especially as we're looking to own more assets beyond Milton. Understanding what that deferred maintenance is, a reserve balance if we do start accruing monies that we can pay for that deferred maintenance and how those are being spent, and then a 10-year kind of look ahead for capital. Those are kind of bits and pieces. I know we're not there today, but those are some of the asks that I would say, at least from my point of view, at a board level, I'd be looking to track. I don't know if those are month over month things, but definitely I would say on a quarterly basis, those would be key benchmarks I'd be looking at.
Yeah, I know it's an easier way to read budget work versus actually digital things, right? I love lots of information, but what's the possibility is trying to do here, but try to pull out some interesting points out of that and say, let's look at these measures.
Just even around transportation, where we're talking, transportation was zero for a long time and it ballooned to $275,000. There's a story that goes behind that, and then going forward, if it's 275, then it's 300, then it's 350. As you build the business case on why we should or should not, have our own fleet, as that cost creeps up, we can point back to there's a point in time it changed, costs continue to rise. That business case, there may be a break-even point at some point where once we reach $500,000 on that third-party busing, it makes sense for us to internalize that. It's a switch then that we can always toggle.
Right. I mean, facilities alone is a place that we can put energy usage, we could spend a happy number of hours pulling on some measures for, but we want to pay attention to buildings and driving any cost. So yeah, it's really great work.
Yeah, and I would caution there, you go down a lot of rabbit holes. Let's crawl before we walk, let alone run on that one. And I think those couple high-level ones are just important ones from a board standpoint, for us to understand and kind of create that broader 30,000-foot picture. Operationally, as you build out, a district, certainly you can have teams dedicated to energy management solutions. I mean, there's a lot of options out there.
Rohit, I don't know if it's a good time for you to share your background and the work that you've done, just so the board can hear. I'm not sure if everyone knows.
Sure. So I'm a data scientist by trade. I have my own company that focuses on, we're kind of an outsourced data science company for nonprofits, foundations, done a lot of work on that. I've started up companies focused on data science in the past. I've done everything from data engineering to data science to even actually how to push policy, finding narratives out of the data. Most recently, we published a paper with the Brookings Institution on how to reduce poverty without displacement. We're already working with cities all around the country on on using that data and actually pushing agendas as well. So it's not only just from the data for a board perspective, from just an oversight perspective, but it's also trying to work backwards from what are the actual asks in human terms, going back to the data so that you create the data. Because you can actually go from a perspective of a data overload and using custom systems, as you're saying, and then they're not easily maintainable, to working backwards to try to solve, getting out of Excel and saving hours that way. And with quick wins, build a data culture around that, get everybody bought in, quick wins to push policy, yet maybe change hearts and minds about transportation to see which routes are actually being affected and the demographics around that, and working that way. So my background is trying to figure out the data from a high level and then figuring out the implementation of that. Yeah, that's kind of it. So that's what it is.
That's fun stuff to hear.
Yeah.
Great.
So some good resources there.
Yeah, that's great. Do you want to give a report on safety?
The safety yearly report goes into the executive session. So,
Okay.
it's just because it involves
Okay.
risk.
Sure. All right, so we'll move on to committee reports. In terms of executive committee met, the items that we discussed in that meeting have been discussed here in terms of policies and transportation dashboards. So I don't think there's anything else really to report out from an executive committee standpoint. Kristen, do you want to do governance?
Yeah, although similarly, I don't think we've been really focused on recruiting, which I feel has come up quite a bit. Stan, was there anything else from your perspective?
I was just chatting with Adam about it before beginning, and he mentioned, because I had sent an email earlier today, I think the last board meeting or the one before, I can't remember, talked about the conflict of interest policy. This is before, obviously, we had this whole policy review, which is great. But I had been looking at different conflict of interest policies and just trying to see if I could provide some suggestions. And I did sort of put together a draft, sort of amended policy for the board to be reviewed. And my suggestion to the governance committee was that we would spend some time reviewing it and then, make a recommendation to the board. So just wanted to let the board know that is an ongoing process, and that hopefully, and we'll see if we can fold that into the policy review process generally. Maybe there's a way to do that. Maybe we'll save some money. But yeah, so that should be, and if depending on how that goes, I guess it's possible we could even be ready to vote on it by August. And again, depending on sort of how that process goes. But yeah, I think that's it.
maybe get 3%. You know, I have some concerns about that parents. Do these things coincide with the kind of work that you're going to do each year? So can you comment on that? Or is this not appropriate?
Yeah, I mean, just to know that we can, preliminary PSSA data is coming out and our ELA data is pretty. So we're, in a good spot, and as soon as that data comes out as a formal document, which is usually over the summer, we'll analyze that and get it back to all of our members. But our ELA specifically 25 is.
So the modification that you made, I mean, I know you made a major comment, so that's the
Yeah.
thing. So that is ineffective? Okay. So how is this disseminated so that parents are aware of it?
I think that might be the next step, right? Which is once we get the data and we sort of share what does that communication look like? What does it look like? What have we been doing? What is a little bit different? How we've been instilling the science of reading into our classrooms, and knowing that it's a resource for us, that it's a study, but not a walkthrough curriculum too. So I think that we might need to do a little bit more of that. We're talking about next year how we do our curriculum nights in a way that is focused on ELA and focused on them, so that parents can come and learn a little bit more about how we teach reading those.
And what about you talking about content also? You're doing major revisions in middle school.
Yes, and I also, just so you all know, we do teach social studies and science content standards. Those are in what's called environmental literacy, which also might be a communication gap there. So there's just a little bit about teaching parents a little bit more about what happens in that space. But we also have science PSSA results out of fourth grade that are also pretty great.
So what kind of areas are you looking to put on the bench for?
For education dashboard, so I think it depends on what it looks like for internal, so for teachers, they would be able to drill down to those individual students. But for external facing, I would like to highlight those PSSA results, but I don't want to overly emphasize them and kind of away it with other things. And so that's one of the moments of the strategic plan that we're really moving through is what are those data points that we want to share? What are those assessments that we're doing? Are there assessments for our mission-based growing global citizens that we're not doing, that we can start to do along the way, and share those data points?
So you have to decide the student.
Correct. Yeah. It's not just about the PSSA result for a student. A student is like that.
Really nice for the teachers to get those early results. It's a really lovely feedback. These are tough years, and to hear that their work is paid off. Kudos to those talking with teachers and ultimately the brilliant academic crew that guide them every day. So it was a nice feedback loop to get to that end of the year. Felt that.
So now the parents need to know.
Right, and it's hard because, it changes, but with most of the students, that is it. I also, if I can just say that we ended the year really strong. I think thank you to the WOW event. We wanted to just recognize that there was a ton of work that got put into place there at the end. It was a really strong push to the end. Our union representative, I don't know if we have a statement, but the teachers really had a very strong end to the school year. They spent a lot of time outside with kids. Kids left the school year really happy. So I really have to thank that public moment, the hard end to a school year that our teachers did. So. It was good.
I like it. And I'll just share, because I don't know if you would know this, but on the last day, it was an ECS Parents Day where kids were encouraged to volunteer, do sort of community service or act of kindness, which I felt was a great thing. Like my kid collected clothes from several family members, and then today we actually dropped it off at the three-story concern, so, yeah, it's nice. It's nice to get kids engaged that way.
And staff too, right? So our staff is challenged over the summer. We did have to unfortunately cancel many of our PCS care events. So we did ask that and they just kind of redo that over the summer. And all summer, just give a couple hours and then in August, we're all going to share the things that we were able to do.
I'm glad to hear that, because I thought, oh, it'd be nice to hear what the kids do.
Yeah.
I was to say, there's no weather folks, it's just not.
Yeah.
3 weeks of sun, just no events really.
Yeah.
But Sonia, did we get a statement from Katie or the? Okay. All right,
And
and
speak for the PCO, I checked it with them.
do you want to give a report? Oh, sure.
They want to thank you for a great year, and we look forward to working with you next year.
That's great, thank you.
Perfect statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that people are really excited about doing staff appreciation and then trying to ramp that up because we don't have the appreciation teachers that we have.
That was a wonderful effort.
Do we have anything under finance and facilities?
Just quickly do facilities, the new high school. Clearly, what we tabled. We have a meeting on Friday. Next 2 days, we have a meeting with our architectural firm for the new high school. As you know, this came in 35% over, and we're having a redesign or value engineering. So we have a meeting tomorrow afternoon to go through. There's 2 meetings set, and working with Dan, of course, and ultimately the goal is to get that back out to bid. So that's the work that we're doing currently. We'll report out a little bit when that works.
Is the Chatham option?
It is definitely true. Yeah.
Is the Chatham option off the table, that building we were talking with them about, or just we're pausing it until we look at the,
Yeah, that would spend a lot of time.
okay, sorry.
Quick governance questions, if no one's here from facilities and finance. How are committee chairs voted on? Is that something that we collectively need to vote on like we did with President VP, or is that up to the smaller groups?
I don't remember if the bylaws spells that out.
Just because both Dan and Sarah are obviously rotating off, I didn't know if that was something the board has to take action on, or if that's,
Maybe somebody wants to step up?
I mean, Dan's been
Yeah.
facility and finance chair probably for how many years?
It's something we can look into. I don't think it's an official.
I don't think we've ever voted.
No.
I was just more looking to see if we have to make that for an action item. I'm happy to volunteer for the facilities, but
I think for some reason, I think I was looking in the bylaws and didn't see that because I was curious about that myself. But we could obviously look into that. But if not, then I guess
It feels like
You
it's
got
always
it.
just come up organically and then someone's sort of taken the lead.
Yeah.
At least inside here.
Yeah.
one Merrill for education or something.
there may be a role for the officers as well.
We can put it on the agenda for the August board meeting, which is technically our reorganization. We'll establish committees at that point, or at least formalize this.
Yeah.
When new people come on, then they get pushed to, they choose a committee.
Yeah.
And I feel like governance typically has also this lead for the committee chairs.
Yeah.
And there's not usually a vote, is
Yeah.
all I know. Does that sound right?
I think Adam mentioned something like along those lines to me, but I don't know. what's been done in the past.
All right, anything else before we adjourn and move into executive session? Also noting the time. All right, I'd like to make a motion to end this portion of the meeting and move into executive session. Thank you. Second, all in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? So moved. All right. Thank you, guests, for attending. We will see you two back in August. Please keep in touch. I'm sure Adam and Chris will maintain contact.
Absolutely.
Sarah, thank you for coming. Thank you. How are you gonna end the live streaming? I don't think we have anybody on anymore.
How's the baby?
Good.